Welcome back, you guys. We're talking with Barbara Ayers today about emergency situations, primarily things that are out of all of our control as far as fires, mudslides, earthquakes even, all of those kinds of things that we don't necessarily give a lot of thought to. So she's here to kind of educate us a bit more about some of the things that we can do. And before the break, I had mentioned, well, how is this getting out to the communities? And obviously in the Columbia Gorge, we're limited on, resources and stuff to be able to put programs into place to really get out there and facilitate education. But for people who are watching this, the best place, talking during the break, it sounds like, is start right there in your neighborhood.
Oh, you bet.
Get to know your neighbors.
You bet.
Develop your own program.
You bet. And for example, so where I live in Mosier, I have a lady across the street from me that's almost 90 years old. And I ended up evacuating her during the Mosier fire. And down below me, there's also a senior facility. And I went down there and checked on all them. And everybody had a right except one. There was this man, and he was just going to hole up in his apartment. And, so I evacuated him as well. So look around you. First of all, in your own home or in your own family, are there people with special needs? Are there handicapped folks? Are there seniors? Do you have infants or kids? Or in my case, do you have pets? Who are the ones around you that need extra attention? And then once you take care of your home and your family, you're going to want to get together with your neighbors. And I also experienced that. The first thing I did so what happened to me last year was when the Mosier wildfire hit, I was going to do the hood to coast. So I just happened to set my alarm. I got up at midnight. And I'm like pitch black out, and getting my coffee going, just about to go out to my car, and my phone rings. I'm like, and it's my next door neighbor. And I'm like, why is my neighbor calling at midnight? It can't be good.
Yeah.
And he goes, have you looked out your window? And I looked out, and it was like, oh my word. This huge fire was right there. And I'll never forget, I turned on the radio, and they said, 30 mile an hour are forecast to turn on in the morning at 8 a.m. West wind. And in Mosier, we're dead downwind of a west wind. So I'm like, holy smoke. So all of a sudden I'm going, wow, it's one thing to be at the city of San Diego and training people, and all of a sudden I'm living it. So, I kicked into gear pretty quickly, but went outside and talked to all the neighbors and just made them all aware. Some people were sleeping. I went and knocked on doors or called them and said, hey, did you know this is happening? I think we're going to evacuate, and it's probably going to be fairly quickly because, the fire's right there, and, I can do the math. And it's funny, even given that, all four neighbors had a different reaction, and one neighbor's like, I'm going to go back to bed. I'll worry about it in the morning. And the other neighbor's like, they kind of did the same thing. And they're like, and I started packing immediately. I started evacuation packing immediately and planning so that I would be all ready to go, so that when the time came, no problem. It's just a matter of putting the keys in and going, and so that I could be available to help my neighbors.
To help your neighbors, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you think that would have been a natural reaction for you, though, had you not had the experience?
Absolutely not. No, and that's why I'm so passionate about this subject, because now I've lived it. I saw it in San Diego. I talked to so many people. I had so many friends that lost everything in a wildfire. So I've seen how it impacts people. I worked with firefighters every day and heard their stories from Hurricane Katrina. And you can see that even now, all these years later, down after Hurricane Katrina, many of those communities still have not recovered. And when you wipe out entire areas, and people lose everything, or the flooding gets up to the top story of their house, it takes forever to come back from that. And when you have whole communities that are kind of frozen up like that, it can be very damaging. That's why it's so very important to be ready. You want to be ready. In my situation then, knowing all that, I kicked into gear immediately and started packing immediately. And no, I guarantee you, had I not had some background, I would have done what all my neighbors did. I would have gone back to bed.
Yeah, then just reacted once it was too late.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, what were some of the things that you knew that you can share with us then that you don't want to do? Because you talked about things you do want to do. You want to go ahead and if you haven't met that neighbor, it's probably a good time to go over there and shake their hand and let them know what's going on. You want to go ahead and get and we'll talk about your kits and stuff in the third segment. But you want to get your kits. You want to make sure that your dogs or your kids or whoever else might be in your household is up, aware, ready, and can go. But what else are some of the things that you shouldn't maybe do? You probably shouldn't go start cooking a steak or what?
Well, first and foremost, I think the most important important thing is to not ignore the signs and symptoms, obviously. So in fact, then I thought about it. The night before when I got home from work, I had no clue there was a fire, but I remember I walked in the door and I smelled like a barbecue smell. Don't ignore the barbecue smell, okay? So don't go, the neighbor must be cooking up something. Just kind of pay attention at that point and tune into the radio. So the next thing I did, again, when I saw everything, I turned the radio on immediately. But then the very next thing, and this is really critical, don't assume the power will stay on. Because no sooner did I turn that radio and I heard, and we'll have 30-mile-an-hour west winds blowing that fire right to your front door, Barbara Ayers, or something like that.
That's what you heard.
Then the power went out immediately. And it was midnight. It was pitch black. Okay, so now think about this for a second. You want to pack all of your belongings in your car, and it's midnight, and there are no lights. What do you need? So that's where what I realized, and thankfully I had been through the training. I had like a flashlight near every door, near every bed. I had spare shoes out. So you're going to want to have things like, I'm really fond of those great little kerosene or oil lanterns, something that doesn't require power. I think we're so dependent on power, and that affects your home phone, it affects your internet, so you're not going to be able to get online. There's going to be a vacuum of information. That's a very, across the board, all across the world, in every disaster, every situation, communication is the biggest problem. Right. So that's where you just kind of go back to Boy Scout and Girl Scout days. That's where you go knock on doors or talk to people in person, or you could leave notes and run them to people. The other thing is, don't expect your cell phone to work. We are so dependent on our cell phones. I think many of us in the gorge don't even have a home phone. We all rely on our cell phones. Mm-hmm. Everybody, those networks get loaded up fast. But what you can do instead is use text. Even in Hurricane Katrina, the firefighters even found that not even the professional radios, because these networks are, they're all interconnected. Texting, you only need one bar.
So
believe it or not,
texting will work at times when trying to make a call won't.
Yeah, right.
Really?
Or you get those little family radios. They have the little family radios you can turn to.
Or whatever.
Yep. The standard is turn to channel 1, so everybody in your family knows to turn to 1, but a lot of times even those can get very busy. So, if you have a CB radio or ham radio, folks that had ham radios back,
Yeah, do people still have
they're
those?
Back.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I guess in this case, that would certainly be something that you'd be glad to know your neighbor still knows old school stuff like that.
Right.
Well, good. Well, we're going to take another break here. I want to talk about the kits when we come back and what you should put in there and all of that. So, you guys, that's what we'll talk about when we come back. Stick with us.